Well, I'm done adulting. You can have it back. It isn't fun anymore. Stop adulting. So recently I heard my 20-something nephews and nieces saying that they wanted to give up growing up. And initially I was laughing because I had actually never heard that term adulting like that. But they were not entirely joking. And I think I kind of understood where they were coming from, because sometimes life can feel pretty daunting. And if we're honest, we all have situations, maybe even entire seasons in our lives, when we're presented with rough choices, painful circumstances that really don't even feel like choices sometimes. And in those moments, stuck between a rock and a hard place, we long for certainty. We want answers. And we don't want fluffy, cursory guidance. We want definitive answers, a rule book, a step-by-step plan that's going to tell us what to do and how to do it, how long it's going to take, and what it will look like when we're there. So this morning, we are concluding our sermon series on the book of Proverbs. We've been walking through the entire book since June, that Old Testament book that offers wisdom to people of faith. Now, the premise of our series has been that in the course of our lives are greatly determined by the myriad choices that we are often forced to make. And we have been suggesting that the book of Proverbs is a guidebook that can help us to navigate those choices wisely. This ancient manual stands the test of time, filled with advice on how to live well in today's world. However, apologies in advance, in this final sermon of the series, I'll be pulling the rug out from under all of that. But stick with me for the next 15 minutes or so, because I promise I'm going to weave together some ideas that I think will at least break your fall. From the start, I'm afraid that Mark and Penny and I may have unwittingly communicated that the book of Proverbs, with all its memorable, pithy one-liners, is some sort of field guide for faith. And it offers us these kind of clear-cut answers that we're longing for, especially when we're in the midst of uncertainty. But in reality, there is no 5 great steps to life included in the Bible anywhere. The Bible is not a universal, divine instruction manual. And it's not meant to provide unchanging and clear, prescriptive advice in the way that we might want or sometimes feel we need. And the proof of that is that many of those compact little proverbs about money and work and child rearing and integrity and friendship, insight, as you heard this morning, they actually contradict one another. And I don't know if you were paying close attention, but the readings that Cheryl read contradict each other. But here's another example. Proverbs 26:4 reads, "Do not answer fools according to their folly, or you will be a fool yourself." Which actually seems like pretty good advice, except the very next verse, 26:5, says, "Answer fools according to their folly, or they will be wise in their own eyes." So which one is it? Do we answer or do we not answer? Aren't these texts contradicting themselves? Well, if you're looking at them as clear-cut rules, one right after the other, then yes. But as Old Testament scholar Peter Enns points out, the very contradictions throughout Proverbs set up the expectation that we will have to think it through ourselves based on our experience, our reasoning, our situation, our wise mind. That is a responsibility that we are never going to be able to escape in the Bible, in our life of faith, ever. The fact is that both of those proverbs are true and wise, and the one we act upon will depend on our situation. We have to read the moment, and we have to decide. Try to keep that in mind next time you're on Facebook or Twitter or in a conversation with somebody thinking about the thing that you would love to zing them with. Peter Enns, I think, rightly points out that the entire Bible is filled with the same kinds of contradictions we find in Proverbs. It never, ever dispenses unambiguous divine instruction, even if we wish it sometimes would. Think back to our recent Lenten Bible study on the parables. We engaged in and wrestled with those ancient, diverse, and wildly ambiguous texts. We relied on our own wisdom and experience to come to understand their import, their wisdom for our lives today. And you know what? We survived. We not only survived, we grew in faith and forged new relationships in the process with God, with our wise mind, with the scripture text, and perhaps most importantly, with one another. The endeavor, though, required us to remain open and curious about what it means to live life in the presence of God. This is the kind of wisdom that is begging for a central place in our approach to faith. Look, I really do understand that there are many times in our lives where what we want most of all is an answer. Just a clear-cut, certain way to go. But faith, true faith, calls us to seek wisdom instead. And it's so central and grounded in our faith that Proverbs even links wisdom to creation itself. Wisdom, we read, was acquired by God before the act of creation. Wisdom is a tree of life, like we read in creation in Genesis. Wisdom is a tree of life to those who lay hold of her. Which means that anytime you calmly tap into wisdom, instead of having a knee-jerk reaction with someone at work or on social media or at home, that is your faith at work. Anytime you are able to sit within the discomfort of not knowing what to do, instead of throwing up your hands and saying you're done adulting, which I admit is tempting. Maybe you're the type, though, who runs around anxiously polling everybody, asking everybody else what you should do. Or maybe even worse, you're screaming at them or yourself. Anytime you avoid that, that is faith, grounded in wisdom, working in your life. At those moments, we are literally participating in the life force that created and sustains the universe. Co-creating with the Creator. And that is no small thing. So no, we're not really going to get that divine instruction manual, but what Proverbs does do is remind us again and again that when we are accessing wisdom well, we're going to feel it in our gut. As our reading this morning describes, the fear of the Lord is the beginning of knowledge. The fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom. And that knowledge of the Holy One is insight. Fear of the Lord will be our guide. But before you start worrying that a life of faith is calling you to some kind of life wrapped up in anxiety, the Hebrew word for fear in that case literally means to flow from the gut, to flow out of the gut. Sometimes we refer to it as awe or reverence. So no, we're not being called to a life awash in anxiety, but rather to a faith that's grounded in intuition, in inner knowing, in insight. Have you ever been in the presence of something so amazing that you could actually feel it in your gut? And sometimes it is such an overwhelming feeling that it feels like anxiety. But it isn't the kind of panic that's rooted in the fear of failure or of criticism or loss of security. No, that's a different kind of fear. And actually, that kind of fear is used in the Bible. It's the same word, fear in English, but in Hebrew, it's two different words. And in Proverbs, we're told not to rely on that. That's not what we're supposed to rely on, the panic and the fear. Instead, trust in the reverence that flows out of your gut. Trust that with all of your heart, and you're going to be on the right track. Fear of the Lord is a trembling, sacred awe that overcomes us when we're like suddenly aware of occupying more space. It's like we're inhabiting more than we're used to inhabiting, and we somehow feel larger. We're tapping into something that's larger than us. And it flows from God, from love, not from fear. And we know it. I'm sure you've had times in your life where you've felt this. And one of our big values here at Westside is to guide one another to recognize those moments and notice the difference between fight and flight kind of fear that does not flow out of the gut. I always like to think it kind of comes from your throat. No, we're training one another to see the difference between anxiety and awe and wonder that springs from faith, insight. Contemplative practices such as Lectio Divina, spiritual direction, centering prayer, welcoming prayer, incarnational listening, sacred music, journaling, to name just a few. These are practices that are so important in our community and in our life together, because through them we begin to see more clearly that our need for certainty and quick fixes and rules and immediate answers is getting in the way of our growing in faith. But it takes practice to increase our ability to hold space for uncertainty. And I think it takes a loving community, a patient community, to encourage us in this willingness to trust the ways in which knowledge and insight and instinct and experience and reason kind of weave together to inform and strengthen our faith in God. So rather than hope for a hard and fast answer key to life, to feed our need for certainty, perhaps we can approach the Bible as an invitation that we can't refuse, an invitation to join in the sacred quest to follow this path of wisdom. Finally, maybe it will help to think of it this way. The same order that was present at the beginning of creation when God formed order out of the void or out of chaos is the very same wisdom that we use to create order out of the daily chaos of our very own lives. It's like wisdom, when we're in it, allows our life to reveal God's nature. Instead of telling us what to do each step of the way, Proverbs, along with the whole of the Bible, offers us something even better. It encourages us to get in touch with the rhythm of the universe, by accessing wisdom in everything we do. Trust in God from the bottom of your heart. Don't try to figure everything out on your own. Listen for God's voice in everything you do, everywhere you go. For that alone will keep you on track. Thanks be to God. Amen. And as we continue to process all that we have come to know and understand, it is our privilege to stand and to respond together in faith. Will you join me on page 5? We believe in God above us, creator of all things, sustainer of all life. We believe in Christ beside us, companion and friend, redeemer of all the broken pieces of our universe. We believe in Spirit deep within us, advocate and guide, who lives with us eternally. We believe in God's resurrection created world, where all things are fixed and all creation fits together in vibrant harmonies. We believe in God above, beside, within. God yesterday, today, and forever, the three in one, the one in the three. We believe in God.